Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about navigating the difficult relationship. From simple disagreements to emotionally abusive behaviors, you deserve respect and kindness. All the information on this show is meant for educational purposes only. Always seek a professional for your mental health and well-being, and always pick your battles wisely. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Love and Abuse. I received a message that talks about somebody who's getting love bombed in the relationship. Not at the beginning of the relationship, but they're already in a relationship, has been established for a while. And they said that you usually talk about it happening at the beginning of a relationship. Love bombing, excessive gift giving or complimenting or saying how wonderful you are. And love bombing at the beginning of a relationship is suspect. It's not always a bad thing, but it's suspect. It's like there is an excessive amount of compliments and gifts or saying all the wonderful things that you want to hear, but to what end? What is the purpose of that? The emotionally abusive person, the controlling or manipulative person, is going to love bomb to lure you in. They're going to lure you in to a relationship that might be toxic. How do you know? How do you know if the love bombing, the gift giving, the excessive compliments, how do you know if it's unhealthy? Well, first of all, it's going to feel a little too amazing or a little too good. Now, if you're already aware of love bombing, it may not feel that way at all. It may feel dysfunctional, and it should feel dysfunctional. I didn't say that right, but it should feel dysfunctional because at the beginning of a relationship, why are there so many compliments? Why is there so much gift giving? Why are you trying to lift me up so much? Why is that there? Because I'm still getting to know you. This is when you're getting to know each other at the beginning of the relationship. I want to get to know you. I don't want to be convinced that I'm great, that I'm attractive, that I'm a successful person and I'm just being reminded of it. I don't want to hear those things. I want to hear about you. I want to hear about what you want. If I'm dating, if I'm starting to date someone, I don't want all these compliments. It's nice to hear it every now and then. Wow, I like your hands or whatever. It's nice to hear. But the love bombing aspect of it is when they're showering you with these kind words and gestures, and it's a little too excessive. And that's why they call it bombing. And you're getting bombed with all these wonderful words, and it makes you feel good. And that's the manipulation sometimes, is that you're made to feel so good that you might miss what's really happening. And it's not the only reason they do that. The reason they might do it is to lower your defenses and your filters. If I compliment you excessively, oh, you're so good looking. Oh, look at your hair. Oh, you have such a wonderful demeanor and personality. I love everything about it. I bought you this gift. Here's a gift. Take this home and put it on your mantle. Put it on your coffee table. Everything you say is wonderful. I'm just magnetized by everything you say. Doesn't that all feel good? I mean, some of it does feel really good. If somebody says that stuff to you, it feels good. But when there's no genuine, authentic connection made yet, that can be somewhat inappropriate and maybe highly inappropriate, depending on if you're just getting to know each other, because it's a tactic used by some abusive people to groom you, to make you feel good about yourself, because who doesn't want to be around someone who makes you feel good about yourself? If someone's always making you feel good about yourself, you're going to feel so wonderful being near them. And so they create this atmosphere of good feelings. And then you get drawn in because you like that feeling, and it might feel like nothing you've ever felt before, because who does that? Right? It almost sounds like It might be something else that when I talk about it now, it might be something else going on. But when you're in the moment, it feels really good. And they seem so genuine. And so love bombing is a manipulation tactic to make you feel good about yourself so that you feel good being with this other person. But it often doesn't last. It is not something that continues. And that is sort of an orange/red flag, is that when it happens in the beginning of a relationship that's just starting out, when that happens, when there's an excessive amount of flattery and maybe the gift giving, which is really gift bombing, but that's all part of love bombing. I'm making you feel good. I'm showing you that I am enamored by you and I want you to feel good. So all of this happening at the beginning of a relationship when you're just getting to know each other and you don't know each other well enough and you're feeling like your ego is being inflated, that's when you really need to step back and ask yourself, okay, what's going on here? What is happening right now? Is this normal? Is this healthy? What is normal? Normal is, what do you like to do? Where do you like to eat? What movies do you like? And then they share what they like, and you share what you like. And then if you enjoyed the day, hey, I really enjoyed the day. I would like to see you again. That sounds great. Let's do it again. And then you see each other the next day, and now you've gotten to know each other a little bit better. But when does the love bombing start? When does any type of emotional bombing start? It shouldn't. It should be a gradual growth. In most functional relationships, it should be gradual, not excessive, not really fast. I'm not saying it can't work, but that tactic is it's used by manipulative people. So we have to be careful when it happens. So love bombing at the beginning of a relationship is a warning sign. And you want to step back and ask yourself what's happening. And also tell yourself this isn't normal. Sure, they may be enamored by me, but what are they thinking with? Are they thinking with, I'll just put it out there, their sexual organs? Are they trying to get me in bed? Or are they just so enamored by me that they're just shocked that they met somebody like this and they're saying all these things? Am I all that? And maybe you feel that way about yourself, and maybe they're right about everything they're saying, but it's a little too much too soon. I think too much too soon is one of those warning signs. I'm not saying it can't happen again. It could be something that moves fast. Somebody meets and they have lunch and they're attracted to each other and they have sex that night, and suddenly it's a relationship. And then who knows, it could last for years or not. But it's important to be aware of what can happen at the beginning of a relationship that isn't normal. Just that's your qualifier. Is this normal? Because if it's not, read about it. Hey, this person is saying how pretty I am or handsome I am over and over and over again. Is that a warning sign? Look it up. Listen to this podcast. Listen to other podcasts. Do what you can so that you don't get trapped, because that's what it can feel like. You get lured into something and maybe you fall in love, and now you feel trapped because you've committed and they've changed. You've committed to someone who is or has changed, and now you feel like you have to stay in this commitment because you have these loving feelings and because they showed this side of them when you were together earlier, but now that's changing. So this is where self-blame typically starts in the emotionally abusive relationship. You start blaming yourself. What did I do wrong? It must be something that I'm doing, so let me change. Let me adapt. Let me fix. And that's deeper into the emotional abuse cycle. And we don't want to get there. So this person who wrote said that the relationship has been established for quite some time, but they feel like it's part of this cycle, this love bombing. It's intense, emotionally draining. They say they don't know how to handle it. And they say, if I don't reciprocate, I'm accused of being cold or having put up a wall or not recognizing that he's trying. And as soon as I become open and vulnerable again, wham, he's mad at me at something trivial, and I'm accused of not listening to his feelings and not understanding his point of view and not caring about something important to him. I was even told that I was acting toward him the way he's acting toward me. And that's very normal. That's the turnaround game where they put it back on you saying, well, you're the one doing that to me. Unfortunately, that happens. And I talk about that in an episode called, I think it's called the turnaround game. It's like they turn it back around on you. And now suddenly what you said they were doing to you, they're saying you're doing to them. And it's just a vicious circle. So that's something important to get out of. You don't want to stay in that vicious circle. Often it's just a matter of a simple question like, or simple observation like, okay, I hear what you're saying and I want to address that. Absolutely. If you feel that I'm doing that to you, let's talk about that. But first, I brought this up about what you're doing to me. So let's talk about that first. And then we'll talk about what you feel I'm doing to you. Because what they're trying to do is get out of it. They're trying to get out of talking about their behaviors and turn it around back onto you so you talk about your behaviors. Because what they want us to do is get stuck in self-defense. They want us to defend ourselves so that we don't have to talk about their behaviors. Their goal is to get you to talk about yourself and defend yourself and stay focused on yourself so that they don't have to answer for what they did. They don't have to take responsibility for what they did. That's why I like the comment that, hey, what you just said about me, we can absolutely address. We can talk about it. If you feel like I'm doing those things to you, then we do need to address that. So we'll talk about that after we talk about what you just did to me. So let's talk about this first. And then, it's going to be hard to do that with some people because they're going to continue to try to turn it back on you. But that is part of the strategy that some people have, is they turn it back on you and get you to immediately start defending yourself so that the original subject gets lost. The original topic of conversation gets lost. And that original topic of conversation is, hey, you're doing this to me. It hurts. Stop doing it. Or whatever it is. You're pointing something out that they're doing and you don't want them to continue doing it. So you point it out. And instead of addressing it, they turn it back on you. So there's that. That's one way to tackle that. It doesn't always work with all people, but that is important to remember that, okay, if you want to talk about that, we can, but let's talk about this first. When you put that out there, then they have to face what they did, and they may end up changing the subject or bringing something else up to point at you and say, well, you did this too. And now you have more on your plate that they want you to talk about and defend yourself about. Whereas you can say, we can talk about that too, but I want to talk about this first. You can even say, if we don't talk about this first, I know it will get lost in our conversation because this is what happens. I end up defending myself. I end up talking about what I did, or you end up telling me all this stuff that I did to you, and I have to explain it. And I don't want to go through that, or at least not until we talk about what you did first. So let's do this first. I make it sound easy. I know it's not. But that is one counter strategy you can use when you're in that situation. So anyway, coming back to this message, they said that the love bombing happens and we already have like an established relationship. It's part of the abuse cycle now, and it's emotionally draining, and I don't know how to handle it. And they go on to say, if I don't reciprocate and all that, it becomes even worse. So I think what I would do is ask a question. I think if love bombing was happening to me, I would ask, why are you doing this? And they may say, well, I love you so much, but why are you doing this particular thing? Because obviously I was just mad at you, and now I guess, you said you love me. Does that mean you're trying to make it up to me? And that's what this person said there. I'm trying to make it up to you or whatever. And this is also part of turning it back around on you, because if you're not grateful or appreciative of what they're doing, the love bombing, then you're going to look like the bad guy. If you look like the bad guy, it's easy to point the finger at you. So what they're going to do is set you up to look like the bad guy. That may not be this person's original intention. Like maybe they do really feel bad about what they did and now they're trying to make it up. But now they're making it up with strings attached. This is exactly what this person wrote to me. They said, if I don't reciprocate, they get upset. That's not a gift. That's not love. Love doesn't come with strings attached. Maybe that's something you want to say to this person. If you really love me, why do you expect something in return? I thought love is sort of one of those no strings attached things that we do for people. I show you love by giving you this gift and walking away not expecting a thank you. I mean, that's really love, isn't it? You give somebody something and don't expect anything in return. It's nice when you get it. But if it's really love and you don't get something in return and that person gets mad, then it's not really love. If it's really a selfless act and they expect something in return and get upset when they don't get it, it's not a selfless act. There's a problem in the giving. There's a problem in their definition of a gift and love. There's a problem, and that might be another question. So when you give me a gift or when you show me love in this way, do you expect something in return? Because the way I see love is something that you give freely with no strings attached. But the way you're giving me a gift or love is expecting something in return. So to me, that's not love. That's not even kind. It's, I wouldn't say manipulative to that person, but I would say it feels like the only reason you're doing it is to get something in return. It doesn't feel like it's for me. It feels like it's for you. It may not be an easy conversation. It may go over terribly. You may not have a great talk after that. Well, fine. That's what they might say. Well, fine. I just won't do anything for you ever again. They might stonewall you like that. So they'll put that out there, try to make you feel guilty and put you on the defense again. Well, I didn't mean that. I'm not saying that you can't give ever again. Yes, you are. Or whatever. You get into these emotional wrestling matches that go nowhere. They just go round and round, and you end up walking away from it exhausted. And they end up walking away, I got my point across, and they better change. That's what they're thinking. They better change because this is a problem if they don't change. They're a problem if they don't change. I don't have to change as the emotional abuser, but they have to change as the victim of my emotional abuse, which clearly aren't the words they use. But that's the setup. The emotional abuser sets you up to fail, sets you up to look bad, sets you up to be the bad guy, sets you up to make you feel like nothing you do is right. And even when you do something right, something down the road is going to counter that and wipe out all the good stuff. It just happens. I mean, there are a lot of people listening now that absolutely can relate to this, unfortunately. So coming back to what this person wants to know is, how do I deal with this? And I've said one thing already, like, let's talk about why you're doing this. And if they say, well, I'm trying to make up for what I did, I think my next question is, well, I just don't want you to do that thing you did. That's not even a question. It's just a comment. I don't want you to do that thing you did, so we don't have to have times like this. And this is important because what ends up happening is the same behaviors happen over and over again. The love bombing is meant for you to forget that the same thing is happening again. If, for example, they're always judgmental and critical about what you wear or what you eat, and you feel bad and suddenly the day's ruined and you're not connecting with them at all, and then the next day they're showering you with affection and showing you kindness like crazy, as a one-off, that's okay. I look at that as, okay, you said something awful and now you're making up for it the next day. That one-off, okay, we can get by that. But what if that happens over and over again? What if every time they're love bombing you, it's to make up for something judgmental and critical that they said? every time. The love bombing distracts you. It keeps you from remembering that they did this same thing before, and sometimes many times before. So now you have to focus on the gift that you're getting or the love that you're getting instead of the behavior that they showed, the behavior that they did to you. If you're focused on, gee, now I have to reciprocate, instead of, no, I don't care what you do, I don't care what you give me, this can't happen anymore. You can't be criticizing and judgmental toward me anymore. You're supposed to support me. You're supposed to care about me. You're supposed to make me feel good about myself. So it's wonderful that you try to make up for it, but you have to stop the behaviors. You have to stop these behaviors. Otherwise, you making up with love and affection and gifts, it doesn't count. I mean, it loses its validity. It loses its effectiveness. If I punch you in the arm and I say, I'm so sorry, and then I punch you in the arm again and I say, I'm sorry again, and I punch you in the arm again and I keep saying I'm sorry and I keep punching, you're going to say, sorry is an excuse to punch me. My apologies are an excuse to punch you. Just like this person's love bombing is an excuse to continue behaving badly, which is why you have to address the behaviors that bring about the love bombing. So that's my advice to this person. You have to address those behaviors. If they are very similar or the same bad behaviors over and over again, then you have to focus on that. If the person tries to take you away from focusing on that, then that is their strategy. They want you to focus on the gift you're getting or the love you're getting and not on the bad behaviors. So let's talk about the bad behaviors. The bad behaviors need to be addressed. Those need to be addressed. And again, I make it sound easy and I know it's not. But if you don't address the behaviors, then what ends up happening is that you end up focusing on everything else besides the behaviors, and the behaviors continue. So this person asked a second question in their message. They said, can you describe what happens when abusers try to change and are successful, or the relationship has successfully recovered and healed after emotional abuse? So this is right up my alley. I mean, I went through my own healing process. I now have a program called Healed Being where I help people doing emotionally abusive behavior change and heal and become their best selves. And sometimes it heals relationships. Sometimes it dissolves relationships. Not because of what I'm teaching, but because when two people can think for themselves without the influence of the other person, they realize what they really want. And sometimes a victim of emotional abuse gets to the point where they seal their heart shut because it's been too much for too long. It's just too much for too long. And they finally just seal it shut. And when that happens, there's usually no going back. When the victim of emotional abuse says, I've had enough, I'm done, and they seal their heart, there's usually no going back. And when the person that has perpetrated the emotionally abusive behavior does heal and stops the behaviors and realizes, wow, I've been terrible all this time. Believe it or not, a lot of them don't realize it. They just think they're right, so they continue doing what they're doing. But there is an epiphany in some of them. They get enlightened and they say, oh my God, I'm hurting the person I care about. I need to stop doing this. That's what happened to me. At the end of my marriage, she was ready to separate and get a divorce. And while we were separated, I reflected on my behaviors. And for the first time, I asked myself, well, if I was doing something that caused the problems in the relationship, what would that be? What would I be doing? Meaning, if the relationship problems were my fault, what particular behaviors would they be? What would cause the problem? And so that was the first part of my question. And I started thinking and I said, well, maybe this, maybe this. And the second part of my question is what changed my life. My second part of my question was, if I were her and I was doing these behaviors to her, me being her, how would it feel to me? And that was the first time I really tried on empathy. That was the first time I soaked it in and felt sick to my stomach. I saw me putting me down, criticizing me. I saw me over there making me feel small, unworthy, unlovable. Nothing I did was good enough. I literally felt sick. It was the first time I tried on what it was like to be my partner in any relationship. That was the first time I tried on what it was like. It was the first time I tried on empathy, like true empathy. I thought I was empathetic before, but that really hit home. And that's when I started changing. By that time, her heart was sealed. I couldn't save the relationship. And honestly, it was a good thing because we weren't compatible. And she was a wonderful person. She didn't deserve any of that. None of my partners deserved any of who I used to be. But our marriage changed my life, and it hurt her. And I'm so glad that she found another relationship after that. And as far as I know, she's happy today. But I had to go through a big healing process. She had to heal from me, from what I did. But that was the epiphany for me. That was the moment of enlightenment for me, is trying on what it's like to be her. And that's when it hit me. So it is very possible that an emotionally abusive person can heal. I've seen it over and over again. Everyone that joins my program, I'd say 98% of them do heal. The other 2%, they can't get to that point. There's just something blocking them, whether it's a lack of empathy, or the other big one is that they honestly believe that they're right and they're only going through the motions so that they can tell their partner or whomever that they are taking a program to stop the behaviors. So those are the two types of people I see that don't make it, that don't heal. They either cannot access empathy no matter how hard we try, and those are the people that just can't connect emotionally. There's something that happened when they were younger or something, and they just can't connect to it. And I'm not saying that they're antisocial or narcissistic. They could be. But I have worked with those people, and they've just not been able to get it. And then the other type is the ones that really believe they're right, and they just don't want to let that go. They can't let that go. It's just too scary to think that all their life they were wrong. That's really what it comes down to. I had to come to that realization myself. My entire life, I ran on an incorrect belief system. I believed you had to do these things to be happy. I believed you had to be critical and judgmental and controlling so that we could both be happy, which is, of course, highly dysfunctional, toxic, and abusive. And so I carried that belief with me. It comes from old childhood survival mechanisms that became my coping mechanisms over the years. And when we take childhood survival mechanisms into our adult world, and that's how we cope, we usually end up with dysfunction and abuse in this case. So this is what happens, is that some people refuse to let it go. It's too scary, and they honestly don't believe that they're wrong. So they move forward with these false beliefs, hurting people, even hurting themselves, keeping themselves in misery because they refuse to change their mind. I've even had someone's partner write to me once saying, "You're the abusive one," talking to me. "You're the abusive one. You're causing my wife to leave me. You're filling her head with all this crap." And I had an episode on that once in my library of love and abuse episodes. It's in there somewhere. They wrote to me and they just said all this stuff, and they're saying, "I can see right through you. You're the one doing these abusive behaviors, causing these relationships to break up and stuff." And I said, I'm happy to address anything that you bring up. My only goal is for both people to feel comfortable in their own skin and make decisions that work for them. My only goal is to help both of you realize what you want. I don't tell you what you want. I don't tell you how to think. I tell you what it looks like. I tell you what abuse looks like. If I tell you what abuse looks like, it's your decision to stay or not. It's the victim's decision to say, I'm going to stick it out. I'm going to tell them that I don't want to be treated this way, and we'll see if it works out. And it's the perpetrator of emotional abuse that has to say, well, I'm going to continue doing this behavior or not. Or I'm going to work on this behavior or not. It's your choice. Anyone that listens to me and says, you're causing these problems, no, it's your choice. I don't want you to do anything. I just want you to be happy. If you're happy being with somebody that is controlling and manipulative, and it only happens every now and then and you can get through it, go for it. I mean, I don't want anyone to be in an abusive situation. And sometimes the level of difficulty and challenge in a relationship may not equate to abuse in some people's minds. But that's not for me to determine unless it's really bad. I can determine. If it's really bad, then I know that person should probably be out of that situation. But listen to my show. And anyone that is hearing me now for the first time, listen to the rest of my episodes. I want to empower you to make decisions for yourself. I don't want to tell you, you need to leave. I don't want to tell you, they're wrong for you. It's not my place. And I don't know if it's true. I don't know if certain people are wrong for you. Look at me. I was wrong for many people in my life. And if somebody looked at my past and saw my wife today and only knew me from my past, they would say, he's really bad for you. Do not stay with him. You need to leave him because this is who he has been all this time. And I changed. I healed. I never want to put anyone through what I put them through in the past. It makes me sick. Like I said, it's disgusting. It's a disgusting feeling that I was that person. And so if my wife was ever told that, let's just say an ex who never knew that I healed, called her up, you're in a dangerous situation. My wife's going to say, yeah, I know who he was. I know him. I know what he did. He admits it to me. He talks about it on his show. He tells me everything he did. And every time he tells me something he did, I say, what? That was you? You did that? That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know that you. I don't know that version of you. So that's really strange to me. So I don't know why I went off on that tangent, but it makes me feel good knowing I'll never be that person ever again, because that old me really makes me sick. It's disgusting. It's not shame I had to go through my shame phase. I had to go through my guilt phase. I went through that. Now it's just a stranger to me, that person. So what I'm trying to say is that it can happen. People can heal. I see healing all the time. 98% of the people that join my program and read the lessons, apply the lessons, and actually do what I'm saying works. You got to do what works, because I know I've been through this. I know what works. When they do it, they change. Not all relationships can be saved, though. But they do change. They can and do change if they are really willing to question what they have believed their entire life. It is a life-changing thing because what they've been doing hasn't worked. That's why I know this works. And when they are done with the program, they realize that most of the stuff they've done is the opposite way they should have behaved. If you want the solution to emotional abuse and you're the abusive person, do the opposite of what you normally do. If you criticize, instead compliment. It's pretty easy. Do the opposite of what hurts the people you love. That's the solution. Not many people can do it, though, because they have a lifetime of learning and beliefs, and they just follow this path without question. And they stay on that path, and people get hurt, and they think it's the other person's fault, not theirs. They don't take responsibility for the other person getting hurt most of the time. So coming back to what this person said, can you describe what happens when abusers try to change and are successful? When the abuser changes and the relationship continues, there are a few people that I can think of right now that healed, and the person they were with didn't seal their heart shut. And the very first thing that changes the course of the relationship, when the other person's heart is not sealed shut, the very first thing that changes the course of the relationship is that the former victim of their abusive behaviors doesn't recognize the person anymore. They don't recognize the former abuser because they're so different. They just show up differently. You usually insult me at this time. You usually intimidate me at this time, but you're not doing it, and it's weird. I don't recognize you. I hear that over and over again. Even at the end of my marriage, my wife said at the time, I don't even know who you are. It's really strange. And that was a good thing. For her to not recognize me during these changes that I was making was huge. That's what I wanted. I didn't want to be recognized as the old me. I didn't want her to see the old me. Even if there's an abuser listening to this show right now who doesn't think they're an abusive person, who doesn't think they're being hurtful, who knows they're right and won't change for anyone or anything, they just know it. You can pretend to do the opposite thing. You can pretend to do those things. You can listen to everything I say and tell yourself, well, all I have to do is all these little behavior changes, and then my partner won't think I'm an abusive person anymore, and they'll be happy again, and I can still get my way. That's probably what they're thinking, and that's what I would have thought. Well, here's the thing. When you pretend to be healed, it doesn't last. It won't last. I've seen this too. Well, I did these changes, but they're still unhappy. That's because pretending doesn't last. There's no solidity to it. It's not concrete. It's not real. It's not authentic. And they know it because they have become acutely aware. The victim has become acutely aware of the perpetrator's behaviors. They will read your body language. They will see that you blinked a little slower this time. They will see that you stared at me a little too long. They know these things. They are highly cognizant of all the nonverbals and the verbals that you are giving away. I'm talking to the person who is doing emotionally abusive behavior who believes they don't have to change. The person that you have been hurting for maybe months or years knows you better than you do. I remember my wife told me, she said, I always knew when my husband was going to throw a brick at me. I could tell. I could tell it was coming. I knew the behaviors. I knew the words. I knew the nonverbal cues. I knew everything, the inflection in his voice. She knew, she didn't tell me all these things, but this is what happens, is that the victim of abusive behavior, they're walking on eggshells for so long, they're watching everything that you say and do so that they don't mess up. That means the perpetrator of emotional abuse is under high scrutiny all the time. And I'm just saying this because if the abusive person is listening right now and they're thinking, well, I just pretend and do all this stuff. No, they know you too well. You're not going to be able to get away with it. They're going to see it. They're going to feel it. And they're never going to say, wow, they're so different. I don't even recognize them. They're so different. They won't say that because most of you will still be intact and you will have tried to implement these behavior changes, but it won't work because they weren't authentic, and they'll feel it. It'll be cognitive dissonance. It'll be incongruent. They'll sense something different. They'll see maybe a kind gesture, but there's something about it, something behind it that they can't explain. They just feel it. That's the subconscious working for them. This is why it's good to trust your intuition. It's usually right. Your intuition is usually right. When you are dealing with somebody who's been hurtful for a long time, your intuition is going to tell you. This is why it is something like cognitive dissonance, where when the person changes, when the perpetrator of emotionally abusive behavior does change, real change, and goes through their healing, the victim of their behavior for so long doesn't know how to make sense of it. It's just so strange. It's a disconnect from reality. Who is this person? I don't get it. I don't recognize them. They are a stranger to me. That's when you know they've changed. That's how you can tell. So to the person who wrote, I hope what I've said today is somewhat helpful to conclude my answer to your second question. You didn't necessarily ask this, but what I've seen is that when the perpetrator of emotionally abusive behavior does change, does heal, it's a real authentic change, and the victim of their behavior has not completely sealed them out and is willing to give the relationship a chance, the relationship is almost always stronger than it's ever been, and they are usually happier than they have ever been because there's no more of that behavior. It's just a matter of if the victim can get on board with trusting their heart to the person again. And here's a little bit of a warning and a caveat is that even when the emotional abuser heals, they can still be triggered. They can still have some residue from their old self. I went through this for years. Part of my teaching is that when that happens, when you get triggered, reflect on that. Take it on as your responsibility, not theirs. And what I mean by that is there's something I tell the people that do this behavior. I tell them, if you have a problem with that person, it's your problem, not theirs. I just said this in my other podcast too, but if that you use that as a mantra. Oh, I'm getting triggered. I don't like it. I want to say something. I want to control them. I want to make them do something or make them whatever. I'm having this thought and feeling and I believe I'm right. I know I'm right. What's your mantra? If I have a problem with them, it's my problem, not theirs. You take it back. You bring it inside yourself. You reflect on it. You work on it. You process it. You figure out why you get triggered in the first place. And you work on that stuff. You work on your healing. And we talk about that in the program too. But the point is when you get triggered, bring it back into yourself and process it and ask yourself, like, for example, I got a little bit of jealousy trigger that happened in this relationship that I'm in now. And I let go of jealousy 25 years ago, a long time ago. Jealousy. I'm not jealous anymore, but this little bit of jealousy came in. And instead of like pointing at her and saying, you can't talk to that guy or whatever, I brought it back in myself and I asked myself, why am I getting jealous? What am I worried about happening? This is where you start to drill down into your own psyche. What do I fear right now? Why am I so insecure about this? And then I start really asking myself what I call stupid questions that lead to healing. I asked the question, okay, let's just say that she runs off with him. How is that a problem? Ooh. It's a problem because, I'll be alone and I'll feel betrayed and all this stuff comes up. And then I'll get even further. Okay, what if I find out that she's pregnant with his kid? Oh my God, why do I want to put myself through this torture? But that's what I do because I really want to drill down into the worst case scenario. Because what ends up happening is that I go through all this questioning and I start to unravel the tight grip that maybe this old jealousy, I didn't even know still had a grip on me, but it still has on me. And then as I go through this questioning, I realize some of the ridiculousness of the questions. I mean, really? She hasn't seen that guy in 10 years and she's talking to him on the phone and I'm jealous about it. And I'm thinking, what if she's carrying his kid? That doesn't make any sense. It's ridiculous. It's a question that I ask myself because I want to find out where I go emotionally, where I go logically. And then I answer the question and I come back to reality and say, okay, is any of this happening? No, none of this is happening. In fact, right now, She's just talking to somebody. Nothing beyond that. Nothing. And so I have to bring myself back to the reality. And that's what I did. I had a little trigger. I didn't make it her problem. I didn't say, no, I don't really want you to go see him again. I don't want you to have lunch with him. I don't want you to talk to me. I didn't say any of that stuff that I used to say when I was in my 20s. So I brought it back into me. If I have a problem with her, it's my problem, not hers. It changes the game for me. It changes the game for anyone that if you get triggered and you push your pain or your suffering or your fears onto another person, that can become abusive, that can become dysfunctional and toxic, and it can lead to bad feelings. And so in my case, I used to push my insecurities onto someone else regarding my jealousy, and that always led to bad feelings, and it always led to disconnect and distancing, emotional distancing. And eventually, because I did that over and over again with different triggers in my life, they left. And so I never want that to happen again. And I also really need to address this stuff inside of me, my insecurities, my fears. And that's what I did. That's what I've been doing and still do to this day. Whenever any type of trigger comes up, I'm the most trigger-free I've ever been in my life. But wow, they sneak up on you. Where did you come from? What is this about? And so to the person who asked, what does the healed emotionally abusive relationship look like? The former emotionally abusive relationship look like? My answer is, if they want to work on things together and that person truly has changed and the victim of the abuse can really start healing themselves because they have to reconnect with themselves. They have to find themselves again because they lost themselves in the relationship. But if that healing can take place and they can both give each other the space to heal, the freedom to be themselves, that's important, then what you end up with is typically a much, much stronger relationship than it's ever been. And you've heard this over and over again. Couples who have survived the worst, have gone through the terrible times, usually end up stronger. I mean, there are cases where it doesn't work out. There are cases where they start to grow back together and heal together, and this is typically what happens when it doesn't work out, the victim really still feels the PTSD. They can't get the feeling of safety and trust around the person who used to hurt them. And so they never get back on board because they never want to expose their heart to that possibility again. And since that person represents that possibility, they don't want to expose their heart because they just can't get into full trust and feeling safe. So that can happen too. I hope this helps. Share this with others who might benefit. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the Mean Workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. The workbook helps you pinpoint exactly what's going on in your relationship, outlining the behaviors causing you to leave so many interactions feeling bad. Take the assessment in the workbook and gain clarity on what your next best steps are. Visit loveandabuse.com for more information. And if you've discovered that you are doing hurtful behaviors to someone you care about and you'd like to change that about yourself, sign up for the Healed Being program over at healedbeing.com. You can take the course on your own, at your own pace, or join the optional private online group where I and others will give you direct support. It's time to stop making those you love feel bad. That's healedbeing.com. If you're looking for a safer way to listen to this show where all the titles to the episodes are changed, click on the Safe Listening button on the podcast page over at loveandabuse.com. This show exists to remind you that you are not alone and you're not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant because you are. We'll talk again soon.